we finished the life of David. We are kind of right now. If you are keeping up with the pace of things, this week you read some chapters of First Kings, and you are in the middle of Ecclesiastes and getting depressed with Ecclesiastes because everything is vanity and there is nothing good and everything is the waste. And I just want to remind you that as you are going through Ecclesiastes, the author of Ecclesiastes technically is Solomon, and he is determined to check everything under the sun. And the highest point of Ecclesiastes is Ecclesiastes 12, okay? So he's in the journey of going through life and realizing that outside of the Lord there is no sense of anything. Life without the Lord has no meaning. So as you're going through Ecclesiastes and reading the Word, do not be depressed, because it's not saying give up on life. It's saying life outside the Lord has no meaning. So today we are reading 1 Kings chapter 9, verse 1 to 9. And I want to ask you this question as we are, if we go back once, I don't know where I put my clicker. Find it somewhere. Here, found it. I want to talk about this topic today of fighting the defeating mode before it actually happens. Do you remember when you were a kid and your parents gave you kind of a warning like, hey, be aware of this, be careful? When I was a kid, I used to be, as from boxers, probably 1 or 2 notches higher than my kids. So I was pretty wild. And anyway, so I'm not going to go into details of the reasons why I want to go there, but I can hear as clear as a bell my dad saying, Lionel, be careful. Lionel, slow down a notch. You can end up hurting yourself or hurting somebody. My mom. So after church, normally we would in the church where I grew up. It's kind of mixing cultures. The service would finish, but the service would not finish. The service would finish, but the mingling with people would continue. And so we were in the city, and technically in the church where I grew up, even the service would finish at 9:30 at night, and people would keep on mingling. So by 11, the ones who were in charge of that day to closing, they wanted to close. So they would start turning off the lights from the back of the building to the front where the doors were, and people would keep on moving where the light was. And in the meantime that was happening, all the kids were having a blast because we were playing together with our friends that we could not see in the whole week. So we were playing everywhere. Younger in the old building the oldest building I remember, we had a place in the back, and it was like a zoo, more like a. It was like a maximized playpen for all the kids. Meantime, the parents were playing, everybody was there. So soccer balls were flying everywhere. And I remember my dad coming in, Lionel, be careful. Lionel, be careful. I'm okay. And then I would go, and then boom. Either I received a ball in the face, or I did something I should not. I ended up in trouble, and then my dad would look at me, and I could read his face. Didn't I tell you? Didn't I tell you? Be careful. Slow down. So I want to go through this passage, and I want you to read it with the eyes of a dad talking to his son. Okay? Do me a favor. Read these passages through those lenses. When Solomon had finished building the temple of the Lord and the royal palace, and had achieved all he had desired to do, the Lord appeared to him a second time, as he had appeared to him at Gibeon. The Lord said to him, I have heard the prayer and the plea that you have made before me. I have consecrated this temple, which you have built, by putting my name there forever. My eyes and my heart will always be there. As for you, if you walk before me in integrity of heart and uprightness, as David your father did, and do all I command, and observe my decrees and laws, I will establish your royal throne over Israel forever. As I promised David your father when I said, you shall never fail to have a man on the throne of Israel. But if you or your sons turn away from me and do not observe the commands and decrees I have given you, and you go off to serve other gods and worship them, then I will cut off Israel from the land I have given them, and I will reject the temple I have consecrated for my name, Israel. Israel will then become a byword and an object of ridicule among all peoples. And though this temple is now imposing, all who pass by will be appalled and scoff and say, why has the Lord done such a thing in this land and to this temple? People will answer, because they have forgotten the Lord their God, who brought their fathers out of Egypt, and have embraced other gods, worshiping and serving them. That is why the Lord brought all this disaster on them. Now, if you read in this chapter, in this section, it seems like, if you're not careful, it feels like a little bit of fatalist call, right? Like a little bit like, well, do this or you're done. You know what I mean? So, if you're just reading it out of the blue, I wanted to remind you that God has called his people, Israel, out of a bunch of peoples. He chose the littlest one, the weakest one, to make them their own. And when he's calling his people, he called them to live in a different way, to put the Lord's name on them, to make them their treasured possession. As an example of what he was going to do, he's calling people out to be his own, back again. So when God is telling Solomon, if you obey my laws, you'll be fine. If you do not obey, then calamity will happen. It's not that God is a mean God. God is a fair and just God. He wants your very best. So I want you to remember that one simple thing, maybe I can do it, maybe I cannot, I need help, next one, is that my well-being rests upon the integrity of my walk with the Lord. Your well-being. So God is talking to Solomon kind of in one of the peaks of his kingship. He's saying, you finish building the temple. It's imposing. It's fantastic. It's grandiose. You have acquired all kind of, I bless you with wealth. I bless you with this. So as a good father, the Lord is reminding Solomon that, remember that you got here because of me. I want to use you. And even though I didn't need a temple, did you notice that what the Lord does? The Lord is the one who says, and I have consecrated this temple. I mean, did you realize that? The Lord never asked for a temple. Yet the Lord consecrates this place. He is the one who makes the place holy. But the place is not a place just because it's something special. What makes the place special is the presence of the Lord. The building on itself, it doesn't really matter how grandiose it is, how much gold it has on it. Without the Lord, has nothing. Isn't that an image of the world in itself? You can put everything you want, but if the Lord is not on it, has nothing. Your life outside the Lord has nothing. But you can have nothing and have the Lord and have everything. Isn't that the most grandiose gift we can ever have? That your biggest gift is not depending upon your wealth. It's not depending upon the material value of it, but it depends upon the presence of the Lord. Your well-being rests upon of the integrity of your walk with God. And when I tell you that it depends upon your integrity of your walk, it's not that you're walking on the edge of a cliff that if you put a foot in the wrong place, you're going to fall down and never come back up, okay? Because we walk in the grace of the Lord. So my integrity is that I'm giving my best to walk in the ways of the Lord, the best of my abilities. So give your best to the Lord. Am I giving my best to the Lord? And why is that important is because the people of Israel had the ways of the Lord given to them. Because it was not natural. It doesn't come natural to you to walk in the ways of the Lord. Does it? No. To them either. So they wanted to have a way to walk in His way. And God was fair enough to give it to them. Because if not, you're going to end up like everybody else around you. So the Lord is saying, if you want to be my people, walk in my ways. Many of you know that if I can have a choosing about what type of computer do I want to use, many of you know what type I prefer. I know, it's funny. But I have a preference. And many years ago, if you are into computers, you know that there was this whole debate in between Apple and Windows. So many years ago, those two were compatible with each other. So if you had a file that was made for Mac, we cannot use it in Windows and vice versa. So it became this different things, and it became a little bit of identity matter. You know what I mean? So if you're a Mac person or a Windows person, and so on. Nowadays, you can use it inside of it. But if you dig inside in the way that we're created, in the program in itself, they are two different animals. They're not the same. In fact, my poor mother-in-law was going to the store to change her phone. And the guy in the store was offering all these phones, and my mother-in-law asks, how about an Apple? And the guy looked at her and asked, have you ever used an Apple before? And she said, no. And he says, I'm sorry, can I tell you that better not to? And she said, what? Because it's so different that you will not find anything. And the learning curve is going to be too complicated at your age. At this moment, you're going to feel a little bit insulted. I think that the guy has good intentions on it, but the guy was saying that the way that things work are totally different. They're not the same. There is a learning curve. There is a way to do things different. They are not exactly the same. In the ways of the Lord, when you come to Christ, things are different. We walk different. We do things different. The motives are different. The goals are different. The objectives are different. Your life is different. Is my life different? So when God is calling us to walk in His ways, because He wants to change the whole thing from within to the outside. Not just the outside. Not just to put a cheap thing on top of you and say, oh, done. He wants to change everything. So even though you look like everybody else, you're not like everybody else. because his name is on you, because his ways are on you, because his motives are in you. Your objectives are not your objectives, are the Lord's objectives, and his life is in you. Make sense? Might look the same. You might look like a simple smith, but you're not. Because who is in you makes the difference. So God is, before Solomon fall, God is calling him, say, your well-being depends upon walking in my ways. Even, so God is saying, even if this place is grandiose, you walk outside and this will be good for nothing. When was the last time that you gave thanks to the Lord for the place that we have? It's fantastic. Can I tell you a secret? One of the things that I looked when I was thinking about coming here was like, how's the building? What can we do with it? And I saw the kitchen and you sold me out. I said, they care. So for me, hospitality and being together is a big thing because it's a space to be together. Anyways. But you know what? If the presence of the Lord is not evident in this place, it's good for nothing. If you're not walking in his ways, this building is going to be used for something else. If the presence of the Lord is not evident in this place, then why is this building here for? So can I call you that we are having a great time and we are seeing God do awesome things and we are celebrating that God is calling people to walk in his ways and lives are being transformed and we are seeing how God is doing more and more and more things. Can I call us out and say, let's make sure that we keep on walking in his ways? That we don't just celebrate our own little stuff. That is all about him and not about us. Can I encourage us to do that? To not lose sight of the most important person in the room, that is Jesus. So, in the way that God is talking to his people, he talks in a way as a good father. My dad was kind enough to explain to me, Lionel, you do this, and this is going to happen. You do this, and this is going to happen. Learn cause and effect. A good father explains that there are consequences to my actions. It's not a whatever. If you read the Bible, it's just pretty simple. Follow my ways, you're going to be well. It doesn't matter how much wealth you have. Don't follow my ways, you're going to be in trouble. It's pretty simple. So God is, how in the world can I say that God is a good father? God promised David, Solomon's dad, said this, I will be his father, and he will be my son. Isn't that an awesome promise? For me as a dad, when I hear the words that the Lord wants to be like a father to my kids, it's like, good. You know what? These words resonate so much that when my kids are older, I will have to pay for therapy sessions for them. Because I'm broken. And in some way, shape, or form, they will need counseling. You know, my dad was broken. My dad was not perfect. Yes, I can testify of that. But knowing that God is their father, knowing that when we come to Christ, we have been adopted into his family. It doesn't matter where you come from. What's your past like? You are adopted into his family. We were adopted into sonship. For us, it doesn't make any sense right now because adoption is not a big thing. But if you, for example, when Paul is talking that we have been adopted into sonship, he is thinking about the image of being adopted as a Roman citizen. And that was a huge thing. It's like they had the biggest passport that you can ever have. You can have freedom to go anywhere, and the rights that you have are fantastic. So when you are adopted into the family of God, you are given a new identity, a new name, and you are adopted into God's family. And God is talking to you as a father. But then something in my mind starts to have a little bit of noise in the back of my head. If everything in my life comes out of the abundance of my heart, I mean, when we read First Kings, we see right away that Solomon had everything at his fingertips, from wealth to chariots to horses to, I don't know how, but he had 700 wives. That is just bizarre. I don't know how. What in the world? But anyways, that's the topic for another message. And you were realizing that the guy was fantastic, but for some reason he started believing that he could do things in his own way. And have you ever been in a moment when the enemy starts presenting opportunities and temptations for you to take? And then there is something sometimes that happens that when you sin, that we're just like bracing ourselves because we know that we did something wrong, but then all of a sudden nothing happened. So I think, God might be okay with that. God might be totally fine with that. So, all good, you know. It might have been a problem for somebody else, but not for me. God is okay with that. So because God doesn't do something as an act of immediate response to my disobedience, then I take it as that's all good. I wonder if Solomon was in the same page. You know, like, I know I'm pretty smart. God gave me smart. All opportunities, they're good, man. I mean, I have 700 wives. One of the bunch is just daughter of Pharaoh, and here and there, and I'm just extending the kingdom, and that's all good. You know, God said don't do that, but all good. You know, he didn't punish right away, so he must be okay with that. Do you notice how the downfall of something good doesn't happen just overnight? It happens little by little. A little complaciveness here, and a little bit of play in here, and a little bit of like, it's all good. God doesn't really care about that. He really cares about this part. And then all of a sudden, you're in trouble. But notice the character of God, that he knew ahead of time, and he was kind enough to let Solomon know. So in this society nowadays, we are struggling with the idea of, can I really walk in God's ways nowadays? Can I really walk in His ways when I'm surrounded by so many options, so many temptations? But you know, in the past, they didn't have so many temptations because there was not so much technology. That's one of the things that people in my age thinks. Life in the past was much simpler, so there were many less temptations, so it was much easier to walk in God's ways. And then I see my kids. I love them, but they don't need much to figure out to do things in the opposite ways that they have to. They don't need technology to smack each other. They don't need technology to lie. They don't need that. We're just broken from within, from early ages. So temptation doesn't come just because there is technology. Temptation happens because of our own brokenness. So, walking in God's ways, it's the same for everybody. Because we are all tempted from the same source. We're all tempted no matter where you're at. And there is a battle happening in your head all the time. First John tells us this: do not love the world or anything in the world. If anyone loves the world, and the love of the Father is not in them. For everything in the world, the lust of the flesh, the lust of the eyes, and the pride of life, comes from the Father, comes not from the Father, but from the world. The world and its desires pass away, but whoever does the will of the Father lives forever. Now, it's pretty simple. Walk this way and do not walk this way, right? Is it that easy? Right, sounds like easy peasy. So how do I stay here? I know the bad is bad, and how do I stay in the good, doing the right things when I'm bombarded all day long with all kinds of thoughts and pressures? Have you ever wondered that? How in the world? Have you ever struggled with, I'm reading the Bible, but nothing sticks? I want to go to pray. I'm doing the right things, but all of a sudden I'm reminding of all the things I have to do. I'm praying, and all of a sudden my mind is going to the last video games that I've been playing. I'm there, but not there. How? How do I walk in God's ways? It's easy to say, do it. And then there's an abysmal space in between the do it and the how do I do it. Right? So I want to address that for a few minutes because I want us to walk in God's ways, in His ways. Have you ever seen this image? The image of the elephant that is tied by a little rope here. And you ever wonder, like, how in the world can a rope cannot keep an elephant stuck? That's because when the elephant was really little, he was attached to something stronger than him. And to the point that growing up, that became like, I cannot break this bond. So growing up, he technically has all the energy, and this is like a twig. But in his mind, he keeps believing that he's attached there. So in your own mindset, there are things that keeps telling you that following God is impossible. Well, I cannot do it. That have been good for Paul, but not for me. Because I tried before, and I cannot do it. And we all have those things. The problem is that they are so embedded in our heads that we don't even realize. If the elephant would know and realize that this was the issue, he would change. But he doesn't change because that's what he's ingrained in his head for early ages. And God is inviting us to go in an adventure with the Lord. And yet, we doubt. Have you ever seen something like this when you're driving? Sometimes I'm in the car and my wife had to hear something like, for crying out loud, please drop the phone. You can end up crashing on somebody. Right? So this mom is driving with one hand and the other hand is holding an ice cream cone and a phone. I don't know how to do that. I have two eyes, but I can only focus on one thing at a time. And so when I found this picture, the words underneath the picture said, reteaching driving classes for distracted people. There's a relearning the basics of how to do that. And Paul says this, I want to bring you back. He says this, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. God gave you the ability to reroute your thoughts. Reroute them. With my kids, when they run into something that they should not, we reroute them. And they go again, and then we reroute them. And then we give it again, and then reroute them. And then we learn, what they need is something different in their heads. So we give them something different. We give them a new objective. Oh, you want to get out? Oh, look over here. Here's the ball. Go play with the ball. And they will try to go back, and then you go back and say, no, let's, here, why don't you play with this, your favorite toy? So what you're doing is rerouting. You are directing them. Have you noticed that kids without boundaries goes bonkers everywhere? Did you know that your head, your thoughts, without having the ability to direct them, they go everywhere. They go wild. They go bananas. And you all of a sudden you find yourself like going in 50 directions at the same time, and you cannot redirect your thoughts. Everybody thinks that you're okay, but inside of your head is chaos. Let me see if I can find. Did I put it, not put it? Is there another picture of a room that is a mess? No, maybe not. Anyways, have you ever been inside of a hoarder's house? A house that is a mess? Or maybe, let's go back a little bit more. Maybe a room that has been unattended for about a week. Imagine how your house full of kids will look like if nobody puts anything in place for a week. How would it look like? If you have forgotten those golden moments of your life, let me remind you that it looks like a bomb went off. Boom. And then you as a parent come back to that mess and you're exhausted. And you're saying things like, how in the world I'm going to put back together this place? And then in your thought is, I know that I need to tell them and teach them to pick up all the toys. But that is so much work. Should I do that? Or should I pick up the things for myself and call it quits? The internal debates of a parent. And then in your head, you are like, I have such a mess in my head, but addressing this issue, it will take a lot of energy. What if I just call quits my prayer life? What if I just avoid the fact of reading the Word? I don't get anything out of it anyways. I get a little bit distracted. Let's call it all together. So what you face in the daily life is what happens sometimes inside of your head. So how do I do that? Just tell me, please. The Bible tells us, finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, what? Think about such things. So, Paul is telling you, apply a filter. Use a filter. First filter. If it's not good, Don't think it. Oh, Pastor, better said than done. You don't know what happened in there. My monkeys are going bananas. Especially if somebody steps on my toes. You don't know what it's to drive on my husband. Right? You don't know how my wife is. You don't know how it is. No. God is calling, you can't do it. Start by the filter. What's the filter? So how do I do it? The moment I start thinking, oh, you know what? Al looked me funny. So he must be upset with me. You know, if I don't know what Al is thinking, but if I'm thinking that he's thinking that, then I'm starting to dig in that idea. He must realize that I'm not in a good place. And if I'm not in a good place, he realizes what the problem is, and he knows. So now I'm in shame. I don't have a clue what he's thinking, but I'm imagining that he's thinking that, and if I keep on thinking that, I can give room to that. You know what happened? I never asked him anything. So I'm living in assumptions. And instead of thinking something nice, I just thinking what is wrong. So my call is always tell a good story about the other person. He might not be feeling too well today. How about if I ask, hey, how you doing? If he's mad, I just want to know why. I say, hey, Al, did I do something wrong? Well, it's your face. No, he will never say that. Right? And, you know, we need to reroute thinking, reroute the ways we do things. So Paul is telling us, put a filter. Do not allow your head meander no end to bad things, assuming that other people are mad, assuming that the world is mad at you, assuming that, can I tell you something? You cannot change what other people think, but you can change what you think. You can decide what sticks in your head. And guess what? It's not easy, because you have let your thoughts meander no end for so long. So easy, one at a time. Have you noticed that your head, this is what I read, I was like, oh, that's a no-brainer, that your brain never stops thinking. You cannot put a pause on it. But you can help it find one thing at a time. One thing at a time. Thomas Kelly said, by quiet, persistent practice in turning all of our being, day and night, in prayer and in inward worship and surrender towards Him who calls the deep of our souls. Mental habits in inward orientation must be established. An inner secret turning to God can be made fairly steady after weeks and months and years of practice, and lapses and failures and returns. You can. It's called discipline. Putting things in order, redirecting, putting, establishing, rerouting. You know why God told Israel, meditate on God's word day and night, and when you are walking on the streets, and we are going to bed, and when you are on the table, and when you are... Because if you don't do what is right, then you get bombarded. You are the gatekeeper of your heart and your mind. You cannot blame somebody else for the thoughts that you have in your head. You cannot blame others for the accusations that shoots up in your head, because you are the one who is welcoming them. You were giving the mind of Christ. How do I appropriate the mind of God if it's not by focusing on the mind of God? One thought at a time, one moment at a time, and to be patient with yourself. So a couple of weeks ago, I found a video that was really interesting, and this is what the video said. If you run like this, and it shows like a guy running and digging his heels on the ground when he's landing. And then I thought, oh, that's me. That's how I run. And then the video said, you can end up with a lot of pain in your feet. Oh, maybe that's why I hate running. Then what you need to do is you need to relearn to run. What? I cannot relearn to run. If you do not relearn to run, then you're going to hurt all your life. And I said, or not run anymore. After all, I'm one of those guys that if you don't give him an objective to run, I don't find running interesting whatsoever. It's more like a punishment to me. I don't understand those that were like run 42 miles. I'm like, that's a 42 miles of punishment. And so I was like, oh, maybe I need to relearn how to, but it's painful. How do you relearn to do something that is not natural to you? Well, practice. So it gives you one. Step number 1, do this. Step number 2, do this. And then step number 3, and then practice. I say, oh, yeah, okay. I don't feel like doing that. With your head, it's the same. You have been thinking this way for so long that the rerouting of your thoughts is crucial for your life, or you're going to end up in trouble. So I have something else for you. Maybe. Have you ever thought about traveling in a balloon? No, I'm scared to heights. There's no way, Jose. But I always felt fascinating about something like this because, first of all, that's crazy. Second of all, it's so high, but it looks so fun. I always like to drive to the top of mountains, and I look the outside. And then I'm wondering, like, how does this work? And sometimes I remember that when I'm in an adventure, sometimes I feel like, let me give you another example. When I knew how to drive, but my dad did not know that I knew how to drive. And it was the time of I grew up with a Standard. Okay, so the first time that we went out for a drive, my dad said, I don't believe that you can drive, but let's try it anyways. And I started driving, and then I noticed in my peripheral vision that my dad was holding to dear life to something called an emergency brake. So he was ready to quit the adventure any moment given that he felt like it. Right? And many of us are taking this adventure of trusting in the Lord, but never let go of the ropes. It's like, I'm high enough, comfortable enough, but I don't dare to go beyond this point. I'm not comfortable enough to let God take over the whole life. If I don't defend myself, nobody will. So in this world, you have to defend yourself. And there are so many things in the life of Christ that are different that we need to let go. God called you to let go of your life so you can live in His ways. But we don't live that way. There's another quote in there that I probably put in there. Can you help me, Larry, find it? There's one on the other side. Is there something after this? Hi. I'll close with this passage for us and explain you why. John 16:33 says, I have told you these things so that in me you may have peace. In this world you will have what? Trouble. But take heart, I have overcome the world. In which section of the passage did your head got stuck on? Okay, not hearing any volunteers, I'll pass to tell you where I got stuck.
In this world you will have trouble.
Yes, I got stuck on, in this world you will have trouble. I don't like that. And when I hear that, is my fear coming up. And I'm not hearing what the Lord is saying. I have told you these things so that in me you will have peace. But you said trouble. There is no peace and trouble together. So the Lord says, do not worry. I have told you these things so you might find peace. Another version says, instead of but take heart, says, be of good cheer. When I'm in trouble, I am not in good cheer. So the Lord at the beginning of this year asked me again this question, do you trust me? Many of you know my story with that question. Do you trust me? And you know that the Lord is up to something when he asked me those questions. And I say, yeah. And I heard a phrase that one pastor friend of mine told me, and I was chuckling after that, and said, if you are happy, please tell your face so. Could you communicate your face that you're happy? And I said, I'm a happy person. Are you? Your face doesn't say so, buddy. And so this passage came to my mind. Be of good cheer. Be of good cheer. So can I invite you in the journey along with me to be a good cheer? To be in peace? To let the Lord lead you? And to start filtering your head, the thoughts of your head, to things that are coming from the Lord? And do not welcome all the garbage from everybody else. So every time a thought against somebody comes, your job is to pull it out. Take it outside. And identify those things and just put it outside. And when you find yourself grumpy monkey, why am I a grumpy monkey? The Lord calls me to be a good cheer, to be in his peace. And there's so much more that I want to tell you about this one, but I want to close in prayer. So Father, you have called Solomon to live in your ways, and many times we have trouble to give the first step forward. And I want to ask you, Lord Jesus, that you renew our life by helping us renew our minds. Renew our minds in you. Be able to identify and take control of our mind by letting your word be in us, be the thoughts that you want us to have in our heads, and to be able to abide in you without abiding in fear. So Lord, have your way. Thank you for calling our attention to save us from trouble before trouble happens. Lord, have your way. In your name we pray. Amen.